Hello, welcome to Mending Threads. This is your safe place and your stronghold for whole body wellness. This is a transformation series that's discussing all topics that may affect your daily life now and in the future. So, we're going to have a topic today about violence, and we want to frankly discuss the issue, particularly as it relates to mental health, and we want to take a cultural perspective. We know that over 1 million persons, particularly looking at the topic last month and this month, have experienced a suicide. We know that the rate of violence has increased over 60% according to the records that are being distributed within our communities. You can't turn the TV on at any one time or pick up a paper about hearing even violence between family members, parents, and children in the schools. And we now know that the violence is escalating, and we're going to look at how culture impacts violence and mental health, and also how mental health impacts the incidences of violence. So we have with us today Doc Walker, who will come on, and he is going to help us discuss the whole issue of culture and violence. And then we're going to have, as our other guest coming on, will be Pastor West, who will look at particularly mental health as it relates to youth and families or incidences. And we're going to together, all three of us, begin to look at what can we actually do and what interventions do we make. So we're not going to hold on any. I do want to introduce to you the co-host for this show, Dr. I call him Doc Walker, but Oswald Walker, Reverend Pastor Oswald Walker. I welcome you.
How you doing, Dr. Lewis?
Great. He's a historian. For those of you who have not been with us, he's an editor, a writer and editor. He's also an educator, teaching African American history. And so we have with us an expert co-hosting this morning. So thank you for being here. Um, I do wanted, we have a topic because we're seeing such large numbers and we're seeing this happening every day. And there must be a correlation impact. We want to frankly discuss your point of view. And I want to ask a question. How would you then begin to define this new trend of violence? What are you looking at this impact in this new trend of violence?
I would say that it's not a new trend. I would say that if you're talking about violence in America, well, first we have to be real frank that America was founded on violence, absolutely founded upon violence, whether you're talking about the extermination of Native Americans, the violence inflicted upon enslaved Africans, the violence visited upon Japanese Americans during World War II, where they were stripped of their land and their businesses and put in concentration camps. The violence inflicted upon Hispanic Americans, Latinos at the border and elsewhere, huge groups being lynched. Um, Even to this day, I mean, we're seeing um, violence inflicted upon Haitian refugees at the Texas-Mexico border,
Interesting.
but that
Yes.
same level of violence has been inflicted upon um, Hispanic and Latinos for generations. I mean, literal violence, people being shot down. So America was founded upon violence. And we can talk about the white on white violence that existed, that was visited upon the Polish and the Italians and Jewish Americans before they were accepted into the white group. People forget that part of American history. America glorifies violence from our movies and TV shows and historical figures, Bonnie and Clyde, Billy the Kid, Dillinger, and all those mafiosos. They're lifted up as if they are celebrities to be venerated. The slave patrols that then became militias, that then became our modern day police forces. These were ordinary citizens that were given the right to carry arms to corral black people and to inflict violence if necessary. And then if you go back to the enslavement, the rape, castration, mutilation, torture, buck breaking, the quartering, the lynching, all those things. I mean, violence against blacks, we have to remember, for a long time in this country, for hundreds of years, violence against black people wasn't even considered violence. It wasn't even considered a crime. You could literally do whatever you wanted to black people. And so I think if we're having a conversation about violence and we're talking about black people, we have to have that context before we start talking about quote unquote black on black crime or things like that. And black on black crime is real because, you know, if you're going to commit a crime, if you're a human being and you're going to commit a crime, more often than not, you're going to commit a crime against someone that looks like you, someone that lives in your neighborhood, etc. And that's why white on white crime and Latino on Latino crime and Asian on Asian crime, they are all very much the same thing. But the only one that has been made out to be um, proof of our unfitness as human beings is black on black crime. No one talks about white on white crime being a thing, but all those are real. But to get to your point, when you're talking about this history of, of violence that we inflict upon each other, or whatever, I'm just so glad that you're bringing this topic to the fore because you framed it as a mental health issue, and it is because so many scholars, so many theologians. In fact, you yourself said once that one of the most important things a human can do is know who you are, be connected to your
Mhm.
history, your heritage, and your culture. Without that knowledge, in fact, man, woman, know thyself was supposed to be
Mhm.
the words written over the entrance to the African
Mhm.
mystery temples in ancient Kemet, ancient Egypt. And man, woman, know thyself is like um, a religious foundational principle that can be found in Christianity, Judaism, um, Islam, traditional African faith. You have to be comfortable knowing who you are. If you don't have that, then you are going to be, for lack of a better phrase, mentally off or mentally incapacitated because you don't love what you see when you look in the mirror. And if you don't love that image, then it's easier for you to inflict violence on people that look just like you.
Right. Oh wow, that is something. That is so even within the situation, when you're appreciating, when you're unappreciating or yourself, when you're not knowing yourself and there's not an appreciation for yourself, then there's a higher tendency to actually create or inflict violence even on someone that appears to be who you are. So
Yeah.
there so then that has a lot to do with then whether or not you allow that person to know or that person's energy that moves toward knowing themselves.
And think about this. Researchers say that for every one negative comment or negative exposure that you have, like a friend, family member, something you see on TV, anything that is like a negative attack on you and your blackness. For any one of those, we need five positive affirmations just to be on an even keel. But researchers have found that the average black child in America hears over 200 or receives over 200 um, negative comments, negative affirmations every single every single day. So every day we are being inundated with this idea that blackness is less than, blackness
Mhm.
can be treated any kind of way, um, blackness need not be respected, and then we see this plethora of black people being unarmed blacks being shot and killed by police, and we rarely see anyone being held accountable, and all that does is reaffirm this message that blackness is less than, it is not as worthy, not as valuable as um, any other any other presentation of humanity, so to speak. And then we got that whole history of us being pitted against each other for sport, for other people. The
Mhm.
boxing that we see, the wrestling that we see, the all the big sporting events where you have all these black athletes. Well, if you go back and look at the history of that is on the plantations of the enslaved, where uh, quote unquote massa would pit the largest, strongest black brothers against each other. They would bet on them on the battle, and it wouldn't be who would win the fight. They would literally fight to the death. So we have been our violence has almost been commoditized, if that's the right word,
Yes.
used
Mhm.
as sport for other people's enjoyment. Um, One of the literally the biggest TV series on Netflix right now is a show called Squid Game. Squid Game is all about it's from Korea, and it's all about these all these Korean folk who are in debt, but they are pitted against each other in duels to the death for the enjoyment of the super rich. The super rich are just sitting back watching these folk who are in debt and
Sort
poor.
of, sort of like we do the rodeo or something like that, or the hanging of someone, or
It's all. And when you talk about hanging, when you talk about those lynchings, it's the same thing. Those lynchings were almost not almost. They were recreational events for whites. They would send out flyers sometimes and telegraphs, and people would come to the county seat so they could, and they would dress themselves up, bring their children and dress them up so that they could witness this black man or this black woman being castrated and mutilated and tortured, and then sometimes set on fire, and then finally lynched. And oftentimes they would take pictures and they would sell those pictures as postcards after the body was after the brother or sister died, and after the smoke had cleared. They would cut off fingers and ears and
I
keep
was
them
getting
as
ready to say,
souvenirs.
take the skin off the body and to make a purse.
Lord have mercy. And so when we're talking about violence in this country, it amazes me how people on the right wing, Republican, neoconservatives, white nationalists, white supremacists, whatever you want to call them, it amazes me how they are so quick to point to black people. And every time they
Mhm.
want to talk, every time we start talking about, we need police reform, they bring up black on black violence, not because they care about black bodies, but because they're trying to give us a weapon of mass distraction, so to speak, to take us off the point. And they want to
Mhm.
always bring up Chicago, but they don't want to bring up the fact that Chicago was one of the most violent cities in terms of perpetrating state violence upon black people for decade after decade after decade after decade. And they don't want to talk about the proliferation of of guns
Mhm. Mhm.
made readily available to our communities for that exact point.
So I'm so excited that we're talking about this. So we have I know that we're getting a class, and we have a class starting real soon of pastors and leaders to learn more about how all of this fits together with even what we're saying, what we talk about in the Bible. Can you relate anything, outcome? We constantly talk about persons in the Bible and whatever. Can you talk a little bit about how persons who read the Bible, who understand the Bible, who beginning to do that, how they can correlate the messages and with yes.
Well, one thing we have to do for folk who read the Bible or go to church on a regular basis is we have to make the study of geography and history foundational to our religious lives, because we talk about the Bible, we talk about Christianity, and without even recognizing where the story took place. Um, to, the vast majority of the Bible story took place in Ethiopia, the word, not the country. Ethiopia, the ancient word, meant land of the blacks. And
Yes.
so we look at Africa as the land of the blacks. The big body mass that we see in our minds when someone says Africa today was not the Africa of ancient times. It was that land, but it was also parts of Southern Europe, all of the Middle East, all the way over to the subcontinent of India. All that was the land of the blacks. And so when we're talking about,
Sometime can you bring a map on so we could see both?
I'll do that. And just this past Saturday for my U of H African American Studies class, I was talking about the arguments for the African origins of Christianity rests on
Mhm.
three pillars. One of those is geography, where the story took place. The other one is chronological or historical witness, when the story took place. When it took place, uh, if you go back to Abraham, that's roughly 2000 BC. And so it's over 1,000 years before any European came into the continent of Africa or where the Bible story was taking place as a conqueror. So most of the Bible story had been lived and written and read and celebrated even before a European even showed up on the scene. So where it took place, when it took place, and then what the Bible says itself. I don't want to get off topic, but it's just so critically important that we understand that because you can't like 100 years from now, if somebody wants to understand who was Dr. Willie Mae Lewis, they cannot fully understand you without understanding where you were born, what part of town you lived in, the people that you were a part of, those folk
Mhm.
who raised you, and you speak about growing up in your grandmother's house and how her wisdom poured into you. They can't fully understand what made you the giant that you are if they don't know your history and your people. But we try to do
Mhm.
that every single day when we go to church. We act as if all that has nothing to do with the Bible story. So
Mhm.
that is where I would start, but I would
Mhm.
continue by
Mhm. The disconnect. It's talking about even when every Sunday or every Saturday or every Wednesday, that we're actually have all of this opportunity to bring on the connect, to bring on the connect. You see, for well.
and it's so important because we're so inundated with the exact opposite. We were literally told and taught and preached to that we were less than anyone else, that massa was God's representative here on earth, and that it was our duty to do whatever massa said if we wanted to
Mhm.
get our wings after we died. And so it is imperative that we use every opportunity possible to plug into and to celebrate our own connection with the divine, our connection as black people, and not be
Mhm.
ashamed of that. You have
Mhm.
black people that run around saying, well, color doesn't matter. We've been taught that color doesn't matter, but color matters in everything. We're the only ones running around acting like it doesn't matter.
Right.
And what's so crazy about it is if you find a person that knows who they are and are comfortable with who they are, whether they are Latino or Asian or black or whatever, people who are truly connected to who they are able to see the God in everybody. They're able to respect everyone, work with anyone and everyone, and not be intimidated because they know who they are and whose they are. But black folk running around telling themselves that color does not matter means that we are still running around here disconnected, that we are still running around here with mental issues because we are taught that black is less than that it, and even if we don't say it and believe it consciously, we show it subconsciously by how we treat
Yes.
ourselves and by how we treat other people. We have to learn how to love and celebrate ourselves and not be feel guilty about it, not feel like we're doing God wrong. Hell, God didn't feel like he was doing you wrong. He made you black and beautiful. When
Mhm.
God made you, God said you were not only good, you were very good. And not only very good, hell, you were the first human beings on this planet were you. Everybody traces their roots back to the continent of Africa, folk that look just like me and you.
I know Bill Cosby at one time, dating myself here, but I know that Bill Cosby had a school in Philadelphia on Broad Street. And he was saying those things, and that until the self esteem of persons, it could be any group of people, he was saying, that first they had to learn about their history, they had to learn about their family, and then to improve the self esteem, they had to begin to correct the thoughts in their mind. And he would have them to learn things every day to appreciate themselves. So he was saying when you look at a billboard, it tells you to not appreciate yourself. But I think if we could begin again to say what can we say to learn to appreciate ourselves? What can we learn about our culture? What can we do every day? You see, to be thankful and not think that we don't measure up, we're not as intelligent, we're not pretty, we're not this, our body type's not the right one, or blah blah blah, that kind of thing.
So when we were enslaved, I don't remember what the National Missionary Society. I don't remember the name of the organization, but they began to print Bible class tracts that gave images of the divine as white, and it was those images that were hammered home the message that divinity is associated with whiteness, and anything that's less than divine is associated with blackness. But what is crazy about that is the most ancient religious iconography in Christianity, Islam, Judaism, Buddhism, and many other religions, the most ancient religious iconography, it is all black. The oldest depiction of Jesus and the disciples are black. The oldest depiction of Mary and Jesus is black. The oldest depiction of Buddha is black. The oldest depiction of Krishna, hell, Krishna, black. Um, on and on and on. And this really is a mental health issue because we have been conditioned. Reverend Albert B. Clegg Jr. called the conditioning niggerization. Um, Dr. Joy Leary calls it post traumatic slavery syndrome. Dr. Naeem Akbar calls it internalized depression. But they're all saying that as Black people, we have been conditioned and convinced that we are less than, that our skin is cursed, that it is less than, that it is ugly,
Mhm.
that it's all these negative things. And you add that on top of the generation upon generation upon generation of trauma on top of trauma on top of internalized trauma. And as a psychologist, as a therapist, if you hold on to that trauma and don't release it, don't talk
Right,
about it, it just
right,
grows and grows, it builds
right.
and builds, and it explodes upon those people who are closest to us. It explodes
Yes.
in fits of anger and violence and rage. Any little thing can set us off, and people wonder, well, what made him do that? What made her go off like that? Who knows? All that trauma that we keep inside of us, and those
Mhm.
daily traumas, when we are receiving those messages, even when we don't realize that we're receiving those messages,
Right.
blackness is less than, less than, less than. If
Mhm.
we're not active, I mean, really, really proactive about fighting that, then
Mhm.
the violence will just continue.
We have with us another guest that's going to discuss with us mental health as it relates. So we're going to continue talking about it. I want to bring on Pastor Laverne West with Unspoken and the Women's Resource Center Imani Faith Health Initiative. We're going to add in a discussion to begin to talk about um, violence as it relates to mental health.
Thank
So
God,
let's,
because I've been talking way too much.
no, that's all right. She's going to add that in because I want us to begin to also include, because you brought it up, but we didn't really get into that. So let's see if we can get the producer to bring her in. Can you hear us, Pastor West? Okay. I think they're trying to get in. So we'll talk a little bit while they're trying to get it. I just want to make sure that they knew to bring her on.
Yeah. So, um,
So
what?
one of the things that I saw, I was looking at the impact that it had on young people, not knowing. So could you imagine just what you were speaking about, not knowing? So it's like a cup, an empty cup. And so when they come, they have no idea what should be in this cup, but they are responding to heat and cold and all of these sensations and things that come to them. And I'm finding out through interviewing them and talking with them, when I ask them to describe themselves, that many of the young people, now I'm not going to say all, but I'm saying that there's a large number who are inflicting harm on themselves, who are feeling uncomfortable, who feel that they're not beautiful, who are cutting themselves, which is almost unheard of a few years ago.
It's amazing that you would say that because I was sitting here thinking, because you asked me to think biblically, I was thinking about the
Yes.
Gerasene demoniac,
Hello.
um, who he lived among the tombs, among the cemetery, on the east side, um, and he was known as the Gerasene demoniac. He was known by his ailments, and that's just so black. You know, that's how black folk are. Um, we give people nicknames based on ailments or physical features, or oh look, there goes Slewfoot Joe, or there goes
Yes.
Black Betty, and there goes Red Betty, there goes Yellow Betty. That's how we do, right? In one of Eddie Murphy's movies, one of the characters, his name was Can't Get Right because he had mental issues, and that's just how we do, and that's the same thing with the Gerasene demoniac. We never in the Bible we never hear or read this brother's name.
Is
He's
she in?
known by his ailment. And when Jesus meets him, the Gerasene demoniac says, basically, hey, call me Legion because we are many. I have many demons in me. I have many um, devils, so to speak, in me. Evil spirits in me. And he was cutting himself. And he was doing all kinds of negative things to himself. But according to the Bible story, when Jesus called those spirits out, this brother was returned to his right mind. In other words, he was introduced to himself, to knowing who he really was, that he wasn't the demons that were inside of him. He wasn't those names that people called him. He was a child of God. And when he came upon that awareness, he was now healthy and in his right right mind. But we're all walking around like the Gerasene demoniac because we're always inundated with these negative things about blackness, these negative things about black men, these negative things about negative stereotypes about black women, um,
Mm-hmm.
that we accept sometimes knowingly, oftentimes not even knowing it. And they become a part of who we think we are. That's not who we are, but that's who
Mm-hmm.
we think we are. And oftentimes that's how our community interacts with us. Oh, there goes
Mm-hmm.
crazy squad. I mean, whatever kind of names or ailments that we're dealing with, that's who we become, and that's who we think we are, and that's how people treat us. But according to the scripture, when this brother was um, came in contact with a divine source,
Mm-hmm.
he was freed of all that negativity and was able to discover who he was and return to his right mind.
So see, that's what it's talking about in terms of the impact on mental health. So see, mental health, people think that it has something to do with whether you hear voices or not or whatever, but anything that affects you not living up what your potential or what your peace of mind or your desires or to be able to carry out your goals or to love the way that you want to love, it affects the way that you put things together and organize your thoughts and whether you can do it. And so people are not paying attention to talking about ADHD and many other things, and how all of those diagnoses, many of those diagnoses are related to the individual not having the resilience or the ability to compare anything to or to hone in a focus because they're so distracted in how handling the external environment that they have no positioning.
Yeah.
So you see, and so many of the mental health issues are problems in terms of anger, bipolar, the diagnosis. We even know that diagnoses are higher with persons of color, of persons that are, the more you deviate from the mainstream, the higher your diagnoses are. But when you take time to really stop with the individual, which is, I think, the difference between being trained to look at the individual. When you stop and look at it, they may have many of those issues, but when you begin to institute the treatment, you will begin to look at starting from strength and helping them to gain the strength as opposed to treating the weakness only.
Yeah.
And so when you bridge that together, then you have a person that can create a sense of balance.
And how you see yourself is just so critically
It's
important.
so critical.
Um, I was thinking about uh, you can learn from anywhere, right? And so I was watching. This is a long time ago. Batman the animated series. One of the episodes had this woman who was once a superstar, a supermodel.
Mhm.
Um, but something happened to her, and her face was deformed in some kind of way. So she wore a mask, and because she was harmed, she made it her business to try to go
Oh,
out
yeah,
and harm other people. And so
we'll get on anyway.
when Batman finally caught her and they took the mask off of her face, they
Mm-hmm.
realized that her face was fine. It had not been damaged at all. But she
Hmm.
believed that it was. She believed that she was scarred. She believed that she was damaged. And so it was that belief that then drove her actions to try to scar and damage other people. And I just find that to be such an apropos analogy to Black people. If we believe, if we are convinced that we are scarred or that we are
Yes,
damaged or that we are less than, it is so much easier for us to then go out and scar and damage other people that look just like us. Even if that's your spouse, if
yes,
that's your children, if that's your
yes,
parents, if that's your friends. I mean, it, one of the things that was considered just so foundational to Black culture is playing the dozens. And I know there's other terms for that, but it's really just us sitting around talking about each other in negative ways. I'm a dark skinned brother. I have heard every Black joke ever created 3 times.
yes.
I remember back in high school,
Hmm.
played football before the games. The darker skinned brothers, we would get in a circle and we would just go at each other, um, talking about each other. You so Black, you so this, you. We almost make it a celebration of a festival of how we can hurt the other like we have been hurt. We don't even realize what we're doing.
Yes. And so one of the things is they're calling this, how you have symptoms of self hatred,
Mm-hmm.
self
Yeah.
anger,
Mm-hmm.
and walking around angry and not knowing it is because you feel trapped and you can't get out. This is how many of them described it. They're just angry. They don't know why they're angry. But then there are losses. So there are feelings of abandonment, feelings of loss, feelings of being not attached. Okay, seems to be associated with a lot of that. So they've talked about this as some form of trauma that we're going in, that it's a compilation of environmental trauma. And see, it's happening within your family
Yeah.
because there is a separation of who can be included and who's prioritized. And the more you look like the slave owner or whomever, the more you appreciate within many of your own family members. And so they'll go like, "Oh, she looks so cute. Oh, she just got such pretty hair." And they don't realize that it's reinforcing and what damages they're doing to their child. So some of
And,
the things, mhm,
and you're in your practice, you don't just work with black people, you work with Latinos
Yes,
and
yes.
India,
People from
and
India,
and the
different,
same is true all over the world.
all over the world.
My first job out of college, I was working with a college prep program called University Outreach. Our receptionist, one of our receptionists, she was almost as white as the wall is behind you. And we, for some reason, we were talking about colorism, and I was sharing some of my stories, and she started crying. And we had, what's wrong? She got emotional, and she said in her family they called her Moreno or Negra because she was the darkest one in her family. Now, mind you, she was as white as white can be, but in her family, she was the darkest, and they made fun of uh, her entire life. You can see that in India with the quote unquote untouchables.
Mhm.
You can see that all over the globe. Um, People have vilified blackness. It
Mhm.
just so it's just so critically important that we learn to love ourselves, to love on ourselves, and to celebrate
Mhm.
who and what and how the Almighty made us. We've got to fight back. We got to push back.
So I think sometimes people don't know. We don't know how to fight back. So one of the things is you can think of what's happening in the schools fighting back. So I think we could volunteer. We could go to the schools and begin to volunteer at least 1 hour a month or 1 hour every other month to just speak and share what we know so our children can see people like them in leadership. They seldom, what blew my mind the other day, you had a shooting at a school, and the camera kept showing all of the Hispanic and African American children, and they had nobody there to speak on behalf. They didn't invite anybody to speak on behalf of persons coming from their particular experience. The only person that was shown to speak to them was someone totally different from their culture.
Hmm.
And that was interesting. And I was just like looking at, so this is some, it was brought to my attention. So I ran to the TV to see that evening. And sure enough, that was so true. So they were saying, well, what do you think those children can experience loss differently? Yes, they do, because what they related to is what they have been accustomed to and what they have experienced. So there's a study out, and the research is showing that young people are experiencing in certain neighborhoods a decreased sense of safety, a decreased whatever, and they're needing people that have an understanding and a similar experience to come and share those experiences of how they recovered, how did they handle the loss, so that they could trust that whole rhythm of, yeah, I'm doing this, but I don't work, I don't have a job, I'm looking for a job, all of the other trauma, the situations that you encounter. They're looking for someone who has experienced that. So it's showing that, and I was looking here, it was showing that those children actually ended up having higher rates of that are similar to post-traumatic stress syndrome,
Hmm.
and they also had um, the teens and the young adults had a higher rate of engaging in partner violence and other kinds of violence in their community. So you see, it's all related. So the more we increase, it seems, with the violence in the community and the person that's already living in an environment, a low income environment or an environment, and they seems to be associated with that, not being able to attain for some reason your dreams or whatever. It's not only is it affecting the physical health, but it is also affecting the mental health.
Yeah.
And they were showing higher indices of eating disorder, depression, as well as the suicide that we're speaking about. And we're not talking about those cumulative traumatic experiences that really affecting mental health and vice versa. You see.
Yeah. So what are some of the things that you suggest in terms of
Well,
You mentioned going into the schools and volunteering.
yes,
What are some of the other things you
one of the
suggested?
things is that we're going to have classes, to have trainings for teachers, pastors, and persons leading to learn how to, one, integrate information into their sermons. Two, to be able to go into the schools through, and which we're trying to do now. We have a once a month program that's called Fun Zone, and we're trying to introduce African American studies into that, so the children, young children, can see it through puppet ministry, through drama, and they can participate to learn about themselves. And I think we need to do that for parents, because parents, thirdly, parents do not know.
Yeah,
So when we do our PTA or PTO meetings, we should always have a component there for parents to do that. So on Saturdays, we have included a wellness clinic, which comes on Saturdays at 11:30. And they'll be able to access it. They could go on our website, wrc-houston.com. And I was intending to put it on the screen here so they would know it. But they would be able to go to the website and see where they could take the class. They could sign up. They could say what they want to know more about. And we're there. But on those Saturdays, parents are able to come on, no charge at all, and find out more about who they are, integrated, and learn how. The fifth thing is learning how spending money relates to knowing yourself. What you spend your money on, as soon as you get your check, what do you do with it?
mm,
Says a lot about how you appreciate yourself. So
mm-hmm.
we look at that, and then how you eat, whether you think how you think of your vessel has to do with how you appreciate yourself. And I think we need to help persons do it without feeling guilty. Through knowing, just knowing, appreciating, doing something. And I think helping another person stand up through what you already know, your gifts and your desires. That'll be the 16 that you could do. So there
Yeah.
are a lot of things that we could do. And then the other is that we have once a month, we're getting ready to do a peer-to-peer mental health coaching. And
Excuse me.
that is where you can train yourself to be an internationally certified coach in your church, in your organization, whether you're a community organization. Every civic association should at least sign up block captains.
Everybody, everyone.
You understand? I'm just saying, at least
Yeah.
every block captain. If you're a block captain and somebody calls you, you need to be able to understand how to respond to them. So if you know that there's a mental health issue in the community, we need to have every civic association trained as a mental health coach, just to know how to respond, what to do, and how to help the person access the resources that they need. So that would be the seventh thing that people could do. There are a lot of things that
Yeah.
we could do as individuals that we're sitting. The other thing, the eighth thing we could do is get active with our police. Police people cannot, you're asking them to do something that I think is so unfair. Now think about this. We're asking the people we just described, who come from a history of violence, have no other way. Now I'm not saying all, because I have some real good, we're getting ready to look at, we're going to do plain talk on race healing. Okay, coming up. So I'm gonna be calling you. We're gonna try to do it on this show. We're gonna try to do it on this Saturday. They've agreed to come. So we're inviting people to plain talk, no denial, no pretending. So now when we ask the people who have been trained to do something to come back and treat people differently, African Americans, without any specialized training or in not living in the community, and then you're upset with them because they respond from the method in which they've been trained. That's why they keep saying, I've been trained to do this.
Yeah.
Okay. And then we're not down there to say, no, let me help you train the people who are going to work in my community. That is the most important thing to happen right now between the police department, the sheriff department, all coming together to say, yeah, let's bring healing instead of pointing fingers. We need to have people on that commission to evaluate them.
I
How are
would.
you How you gonna? Please help me.
I would say to bring it back home, having black artwork, having
Every
black iconography, magazines. Growing up, my parents always had Ebony, Jet, Essence all
yes,
over the place. And they didn't have to preach that black was beautiful because I saw it all the time. I literally
yes,
saw it all the time. And
yes.
we're living at a time where, um, in terms of movies and TV shows, there's a lot of really talented black artists that are writing and directing movies and TV shows that celebrate all the different aspects of our global experience. And I think we have to do a better job of making sure that that's what our children and our adults are exposed to more of. The black writers, like I've been reading Octavia. I know this is not a new book at all. Octavia Butler and her book Parable of the Sower. It is just Octavia Butler. She's the Afrofuturist writer, but just powerful. My favorite fiction writer is Walter Mosley, another brother. Just powerful. Uh, Tony Walk, Alice Walker, Toni Morrison's works,
Yes,
Louis
yes.
I and Sula, and there's just so much out there, so
So
much
many,
black
so much.
brilliance out there that that blows away all these notions that we are less than, but we have to expose ourselves to it on a regular
So
basis.
I thought when we come on our next month's show, what might be helpful is not only that we begin to start showing maps of the areas that we're speaking about and relating them, but that we would be able to read something from different books or materials. And like you're mentioning, those books that we'd be able to take excerpts and discuss how those books would relate to people. And then if
Hmm.
you gave us a reading list, if you gave us something, we could even have that ready so that people could get the materials. And you have some books that you have written, and I would
I do.
love to see if we could do that. I know it's going to be related to your course coming up. So I'm going to, while I have an opportunity just before our ending, is to let you know that Doc Walker has many publications, but also he's going to have a class. If you're a leader, if you're a pastor, if you want to look at how this integrate, now remember, he's a pastor, he's a historian, and he has a good integration, and he gives beautiful sermons. And the thing that's most important here is both young and old love to hear him. And so in that, we're trying to save our youth and bring them to many of the word, bring to the word, and understand how it is in daily life living. This would be something that you would want to do. Please go on and take it, sign up for the class, and I'll be contacting each of you. And yes, you can call me at 281 381 2276. 281 381 2276, or you can go on our website, wrc-houston.com, Women's Resource Center Incorporated. We're the Imani Faith Health Initiative, and so we look at bringing um, faith component to our health decision making and cultural background together to bring a whole body wellness. So
And I don't know if our producer is available, but I'm literally trying to share my screen right. Oh, there we go.
yes,
Because
yes.
you were asking me, and you really, I need to give a better image. But there's a white oval circle right here. Within that circle, that's where the majority of the Old Testament story took place. Within the red circle, that's where the vast majority of the New Testament story took place. And then, I mean, there's just so much. Like these images right here. Um, we we were brainwashed into believing that Egypt was not in Africa, but all these are people from Egypt. Um, King Tutankhamun, at the top left hand corner. The sister next to him, that's his grandmother, Queen T. Right below that, where you see 5 or 6 sisters and brothers, that I call that an Egyptian selfie. That's how the Egyptians viewed themselves. And then we're talking black, 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 and then there are all kinds of books that we can expose ourselves to. African religions and philosophy, what they never told you in history class, the African origins of civilization, myth or reality. There's just so
I would love.
they
I would
came
love.
before Columbus.
I haven't read that one. That one. I've read some information about it, but I haven't read that one. So I would love to read that book there. Hmm.
Yeah, there's some really good stuff out there for those that are interested.
Well, I want to thank you for being here today, and I know that we all have busy schedules, but just thank you for offering this information. I know that many people are going to be healed by these study groups. And not only are we taking the class, if you want to have interaction in a study group, there'll be people that we can kind of bounce information off. So it'll be interactive as well. So we're going to look forward to your signing up. So I want to thank everybody for being here. Dr. Walker, I truly thank you for sharing such information that we cannot hear on the radio, on the TV, in the
Mm,
classroom, but we can hear it here. Thank you so much.
thank you.
So I want to say this: renew beliefs, rebuild faith, and reconnect families and communities. For it's not the circumstances we meet, it is the manner in which we respond that determines health, happiness, and success. And those of you who sent in a note will be able to on next week answer those. Thank you now. So I look forward to seeing you same time, same place next week.